All right, let's unpack this. Our mission today is it's arguably the biggest one we've ever taken on.
I think you might be right.
We are plunging headfirst into the ultimate, still unsolved mystery, consciousness itself. And we have a massive stack of source material here spanning from, cutting-edge computational neuroscience all the way back to ancient philosophy.
It's the Everest of interdisciplinary challenges, really.
Yeah,
We're trying to map subjective experience, what it feels like, what it's like to be, using purely objective, measurable data.
that's the core tension, isn't it?
Absolutely. And in this deep dive, we're going to explore two primary, almost adversarial pathways.
Hmm.
First, we'll look at theories that try to quantify consciousness, give it an actual mathematical value.
And second.
Second, we'll step into the subjective frontier. We'll explore what altered states like sleep, paralysis, and non-dual awareness can tell us about the nature of our own self.
Which leads us to our central question. Can we assign a definite objective number, what researchers call phi, to consciousness? Or is the subjective, centerless nature of awareness simply something that just happens?
To start with the numbers,
Yeah.
let's talk about integrated information theory, IIT.
Right.
It was proposed by a neuroscientist, Giulio Tononi, back in 2004. And IIT is, it's a truly ambitious project.
Right.
It aims to explain which physical systems are conscious, to what degree, and critically, why they feel the way they do.
What I find so fascinating about IIT is its starting point. Usually you have the hard problem, right? How does brain stuff create subjective feelings?
The classic problem.
But IIT just flips the script. It starts with the one thing you know for sure, your own experience, and then it works backward to figure out what the physical substrate must be like to create that. It's working from the inside out.
Exactly. And that inside-out approach leads directly to its core structure, the axioms and the postulates. IIT says any experience has 5 essential properties, the axioms. Things like intrinsicality, it exists for itself, and integration, it's a single unified whole, like one unbroken picture. And these axioms then map directly onto physical postulates that the system has to satisfy.
Okay, help me translate that for our listener. When we talk about a system needing to be irreducible as a whole, what does that mean in practice?
It means that if you took the system, say a conscious brain network, and you try to break it down into smaller parts,
Okay.
those smaller parts would not retain the original conscious experience, it would just vanish. The network's conscious structure has to be more than the sum of its parts. It generates this intrinsic cause-effect power you can't see by just looking at the components separately.
That irreducibility sounds crucial, and that's where the math, specifically this phi, comes into play. So if phi is the quantity of consciousness, how do they handle the quality? Why does red look red?
That's the key question. The quality, that subjective flavor, is defined by what they call the psi structure. It's the specific web of distinctions and relations formed by all the system subsets. So the phi value is the quantity, the sheer amount of irreducible power. But the shape of that power, the structure itself, that defines what it feels like.
So they're saying the experience isn't caused by the structure.
They're saying it is the structure, an
Yeah.
identity.
Wow. And that framework leads to some genuinely surprising conclusions. Like, let's talk about the cerebellum. It's a huge part of the brain. What, 80% of our neurons?
A huge percentage.
Yeah.
And it's vital for motor control, balance, all sorts of things.
And yet, IIT suggests it might not contribute to consciousness at all.
Exactly. And that's the key insight. The cerebellum is huge, but its organization is very repetitive, almost feed-forward, like a simple switchboard. It doesn't generate high integrated information. It doesn't fold back on itself to create that irreducible integrated structure.
So in this model, size doesn't matter. It's all about the structure.
Structure is king.
Now, here's the major catch I was reading about, the computational wall. Calculating this true maximal phi for anything even moderately sized is, well, they say it's computationally impossible.
It's the theory's Achilles heel right now.
It is.
Because calculating the true value for anything beyond, a few dozen simulated neurons is intractable.
Mm-hmm.
Researchers have had to develop proxies, approximations.
And these proxies, they're not proven to be perfectly accurate.
That's the big scientific caveat. We think they're measuring the right kind of thing, but there's no mathematical proof they have a perfect relationship to the real phi.
Despite that, IIT has definitely left the lab. It inspired a really practical clinical measure, didn't it? The Perturbational Complexity Index, or PCI.
Yes, the PCI. It uses TMS EEG on unresponsive patients to assess consciousness levels. You basically give the brain a little magnetic jolt and measure how complex and integrated its response is.
And there was also that study in 2021 with fruit flies.
A major success story. They actually managed to directly compute the maximal phi for a small neural data set from fruit flies, Drosophila and melanogaster. And they found that the value dropped significantly when the flies were under general anesthesia.
Which is exactly what IIT would predict. Less integration, less consciousness.
A perfect match for the prediction.
And it sounds like this theory went through a massive stress test, this $6 million adversarial collaboration.
Incredible. The Templeton Foundation basically set up a cage match between IIT and its main rival, global neuronal workspace theory.
A cage match for consciousness theories. I love it.
And they had to agree on the predictions and thresholds beforehand. In the final results, published in 2025, 2 out of 3 of IIT's pre-registered predictions passed. Gene WT's failed. That's a huge win in an objective test.
And yet, despite those successes, the debate is still, fiercely intense. We saw scholars in 2023 and 2025 calling IIT unscientific or even pseudoscience.
It just shows you how deep these philosophical divides run. How do you truly measure something that only exists subjectively? It's the core challenge. So, since the objective math is still so contentious, maybe we should pivot.
To our own internal experience.
Exactly. Let's see what subjective states like sleep and altered awareness can tell us.
Sleep is a perfect place to start. It's this anabolic state, vital for, repairing the body, memory consolidation. We cycle through non-REM and REM sleep every 90 minutes or so.
And of course, the classic first-person experience during sleep is dreaming, usually in REM. Dreams are so elusive. They can be bizarre, surreal, yet they feel completely logical to you in the moment.
And then they just evaporate when you wake up.
They do. But sometimes awareness clicks on during the irrationality. That's lucid dreaming. You become fully aware that you're dreaming while the dream is still happening.
And what's amazing is that researchers have actually communicated with lucid dreamers in real time. They use eye movements as signals during REM sleep.
That ability to answer complex questions, to use working memory while you're asleep, it proves that the brain retains this sophisticated metacognitive function awareness of its own processes, even while generating a complete fiction.
So if lucid dreaming is the mind succeeding, sleep paralysis, that's the system failing dramatically. It's a genuinely terrifying state.
It's a dysfunctional overlap.
Yeah.
Your brain is awake, but your body is still locked down in the muscular paralysis of REM sleep.
And the symptoms are just profoundly visceral. People hear buzzing, they can't move or speak, and often there's this hallucination of a dark figure, the infamous sleep paralysis demon.
People feel this intense pressure on their chest, like they're suffocating.
That fear, it's so central to the whole thing. What's actually going wrong to create that specific, terrifying feeling of being oppressed?
It's a mechanism of misinterpretation. It's a failure of the REM transition. So when you wake up but you're still paralyzed, your ancient threat-activated vigilance system in your midbrain just goes into hyperdrive.
So your brain thinks you're in danger.
Right. And at the same time, REM breathing is naturally shallow and rapid, which can cause a slight airway blockage. Your awake, hypervigilant brain interprets that normal physical struggle for a deep breath, not as physics, but as an evil presence physically sitting on your chest.
Wow. So the hallucination and the physical feeling just feed off each other.
Vicious cycle, which makes the cultural context so powerful. Our sources note that in Denmark, it's often seen as just a weird physiological event. But in Egypt, it's linked to malevolent jinn spirits.
And that belief changes the experience itself.
It correlates directly with much higher reported fear and longer episodes. Belief shapes the conscious state.
This contrast between the hyper-aware self in lucid dreaming and the terrified, centered self in paralysis, it brings us back to this idea of the centerless self.
It really does.
This is where it gets really interesting for me. If non-dual philosophy says consciousness has no center, why do we feel direction? Why does a sound feel like it's 50 feet to my left, instead of just an impression in a locationless field?
That's the paradox, isn't it? The non-dual perspective would say that the direction, the 50 feet away, is itself just another mental appearance or impression within consciousness. It's a label. The moment we try to find the experiencer who is feeling that sensation, we hit a wall.
The infinite regress problem, the analogy of the screen and the experiencer.
Exactly. We feel like the real me is watching the contents on a screen. But then you ask, how does that experiencer experience the contents? You'd need another smaller experiencer inside of it and another inside of that forever.
So the regress only stops if we accept the alternative.
That experiencing just happens by itself. Think of waves on a lake. The waves don't need a tiny separate center to realize they're happening. They just happen. The content of the experience is the experiencing of it. That feeling that you're a separate, centered self, that's just another tension of the mind that can, in theory, be let go of.
So we've covered these vastly different approaches. On one hand, you have IIT, trying to calculate the value of consciousness, reducing it to these irreducible cause-effect structures, this phi number.
A very rigorous mathematical approach.
And on the other, you have subjective experience suggesting that the very center that defines us is just a mental impression.
And now AI is kind of bridging that gap.
Hmm.
Look at the EG Mobile deep learning model. It classifies sleep stages, wake, N1, N2, N3, and REM, by converting raw EEG brain signals into spectrogram images.
It's turning brainwaves into pictures.
And then just using pattern recognition on the pictures. And it's incredibly accurate. The model achieved, what, an 86.97% accuracy? And the speed is just, it's a game changer.
A game changer how?
Well, to give you a sense, training an entire fold for this classification took only 20 minutes with the data in RAM. The traditional process of a trained clinician scoring these states would take hours. It's taking the raw, complex activity of a conscious brain and translating it quickly and accurately into a computational pattern.
Which leaves us with this provocative final thought for you to mull over. If we can reliably categorize and predict conscious states by processing electrical brain data as mere visual images, does the quality of subjective experience reside solely in that complex information structure like IIT suggests?
Or is the very successful translation of our mind into computational patterns a hint that the structure itself is all that fundamentally matters? That the central self is maybe just a secondary illusion that dissolves when you analyze it closely enough?
Something to consider as you transition from this deep dive back into your own conscious awareness.